Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing very well this morning, and you're doing okay too?
Doing well, yes, indeed.
Yes, very good. I went to help make the world feel better too.
That's right.
We make a little bit here and a little bit there, maybe.
Do our best.
But anyway, the first time I ran for Congress, when Carol was challenging me, I said, it's just for me, it's therapy for me. I got to get off my chest. I feel better about it if at least I throw it out there, and sometimes people will listen. But I've been very pleased with our past week here, our ups and downs, but I'm glad we're back in action here. And what is the most important thing going on today? Well, I could think of a lot of things, but the world is very, very much attuned to the presidential debate. Number one, and I have some personal thoughts about presidential debates, but nothing.
You've been in a couple of them.
Nothing as significant as the one today. I saw one person come up with a statistic that if two candidates have debates, and if they have, and over the years they measured this, all debates are important. But the most important debate is the first debate. And the most important part of the first debate is the first 15 minutes.
Interesting.
And they think that there's predictions that there will be a huge audience out there. We could call the president. I'm sure he's busy. And we could suggest to him how he should use up his 15 minutes, but I think he probably already knows. Yeah. But there'll be a lot of people watching. So I think that one thing I might do during the debate, I don't generally enjoy some of these speeches and debates, but I need to. I want to watch it and find out what's happening. But I thought, what it would be the best thing to measure immediate reaction? And I thought maybe the futures market.
Yeah,
because if Biden comes out and bombs, which I don't predict he will. I mean, I think he may come out stiff, but he's not going to totally bomb. But if he did, I think the futures market would probably go even higher than they are now because they're abnormally high. But because the markets react rather quickly. So that's one thing that I might do. But, I was thinking, I saw Hedge today put up a lot of questions that Trump ought to ask Biden, but they're all, politicized and interesting, and you'll never get the answers. But I was thinking, what could we do if we had the chance? What should we be asking for? And to me, it would be, what about a serious discussion? Since to me it is a big issue, is the principle and the challenge that we're facing with lockdown.
Yeah.
That would be a time we can introduce the notion of Black Lives Matter. We could introduce the notion of the Federal Reserve causing the downturn, then also the economic ramifications of lockdown. But I think the general public right now would say that Democrats love lockdown a lot more than Republicans, but Republicans aren't innocent. There's some Republican governors that are very, very bad, and we've suffered. Oh yeah, you're thinking about our closely related governor here in this state. But anyway, I think a debate like that. When I was in debates, I didn't try to overwhelm myself with this, and the minute detail. Because to me, the real debate in my mind and what I have done is try to simplify it, not make it complicated. And to me, throughout all our history, from our revolution on down, the contest is always between freedom, more freedom, individual liberty, and tyranny.
Yeah.
And the founders talked about tyranny. We're talking about tyranny now. But that's really the contest. But you're never going to have anybody come up and say, I'm a tyrant, vote for me.
Yeah.
They have to lie their way through it and pretend that it's something that they'll just provide for you and you're supposed to vote for them. And the same way with the other side. Nobody dare come up and say, what we want is purity and liberty because, oh boy, you mean I have to give up this, I have to give up this, but the government has to take care of me. But I still think having those two concepts and understanding them I sort of did this as you helped me when I was in Congress, we decide, is it more spending or less spending, more freedom or less spending? So at least you can have a goal and where to go. Instead, most of the time, everything is mishmash in the middle, and it's pragmatism and utilitarianism and satisfying special interests. It becomes politicized. That, to me, is the wrong approach, but I don't think they're going to be following my suggestions tonight.
You know, it's funny, believe it or not, yesterday I was looking back at some of your old debates, the presidential debates, and there was a really funny scene because it was Gingrich and everyone was up there and everyone's rattling on about, I'm going to cut this much out and I'm going to do this. And then they turned to you at last, of course, as they usually did. And you just kind of leaned back and said, you know, I see things a little bit differently. And then you gave this whole philosophical approach and they were just, you know, but this, I don't think this is going to be a philosophical discussion
Probably
tonight.
not.
You know, our friend John Whitehead, who's so great on so many things, he had a good article at the Rutherford Institute up, and we'll put it up on our site later today. But he talked about basically what won't be seen at the election, and he makes a good point. And I'm gonna hit this as a quote, and this is something we should really take on board. Is that politics is a game, a joke, a hustle, a con, a distraction, a spectacle, a sport, and for many devout Americans, a religion. It's a political illusion aimed at persuading Americans that they are free and that their vote counts. And I think that's what we're seeing, you know.
And I think that's a point that I try to make. It shouldn't be all that complicated.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a right to your life and you can do what you want as long as you don't hurt people, I know the young people respond to that in spite of the shortcomings of a lot of young people and the participation. There's a lot of young people would like to see it simplified and say, well, do you think your life belongs to you, or do you want to turn it over to the bureaucrats in Washington? And their response is usually, very good and natural, because I think it is natural to want to be your own person. I think we're born with that tendency, to be our own person. We're very independent. Children are independent. Teenagers are independent, and it has to be sorted out. But it's the big challenge is, who's going to do this sorting out? Yeah. Oh, the people who know what's best for us. The people who will say, well, we know what to do. We know how to protect you from viruses on down to any invasion that is coming and against the big government. Government's there to take care of us. How often you hear the story, well, we need this. The government needs to take care of this. But they never ask, who in thunder is the government? Where does it come from? And maybe inadvertently, they become the government more than they ever dreamed. They say, well, I'm not. Even if that's true, that the government doesn't have the money, they'll take it from the rich, which is a bunch of baloney. Yeah. They concede the principle of taking from one to help others, and they buy into this, not realizing that it doesn't happen that way. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and we wipe out the middle class. And that is not too complicated once you give it just a little understanding of monetary policy and the principles. But when you go along with this whole idea that you can have people who are seen as totally inefficient, not knowing how to take care of themselves, well, we'll pick out a few of them. We'll send them to Washington. They'll know how to take care of all of us, which is it's an unbelievable situation. Yet people do that. The government will take care of me, and it is that conditioning that has existed and has grown in our history and our country for the past essentially 100 years.
Yep. It's like Lucy and Charlie Brown with that football. This time it'll be different. We'll hold the ball. But when you look at the real issues that we care about, that Americans should be thinking about, we really don't, and this is why we use the title, we really don't think that these are going to come up because there really isn't a philosophical basis for either of the two being against each other. It's just Team A against Team B. One candidate may be better than the other on certain issues, but you think about something like the surveillance state. I've not heard either candidate talk about the need to roll back the surveillance state, the illegality of what the government was doing that we have been exposed to by Ed Snowden and Julian Assange, who, by the way, are still being persecuted by both parties equally. It was Obama that started persecuting them, and it's Trump that's continuing. None of that. The military-industrial complex. Oh, Biden is going to do something about that? He spent 50 years propping up the military-industrial complex, and and President Trump brags about, we're going to buy some more missiles, more shiny, rockets. So civil liberties, we talked a little bit about it. Biden said, I'm going to force everyone to wear a mask. I don't care.
Right.
So these issues I don't think will come up.
It all it should all go back, and that's what I try to get young people to think about. It all goes back to what does it do to your choices in your life and what it's all about. And why can't you make these decisions? Oh, you might. People say, well, you might make the wrong decision. And it astounded me in Washington when I had members of Congress come up when in a dignified manner or have a bit of a discussion like this, and they say, yeah, but you know, that sounds good. But people, they say, the people are too dumb.
Yeah.
Too dumb. They don't know what to do. And they won't take care of themselves, and we have to take care of them. But they're not saying, I think I'm a dictator. I know how to dictate. People don't deserve their rights because they might make a mistake. And never once will they look at the situation and show that they're making it much worse by having factions here who are the special interest, factions over here, and they've been struggling how to divvy up the pie. Of course, the loot is shrinking, and that's why we're facing these crises. The bankruptcy is on our doorstep, and that's why this is coming to an end, because the politicians are running out of stuff that they can steal, and of course. That's why I think we have a lot of trouble ahead. But I don't think the problem is that complicated. And if we just get more people to agree that maybe protecting liberty is a much more important project than establishing dignified authoritarianism that will work better.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's not going to be really discussed and debated that strongly is, as you alluded to earlier, the lockdown of the country, the destruction of the economy. They won't blame it on bad actions taken. And I think President Trump probably saw this all along. He certainly sees it now, I think, and that's why he's appointed Dr. Scott Atlas, who's not perfect, but certainly better than the people that he's apparently replaced on the issue of public policy on the coronavirus. But the others are not going to back down. And in fact, we have a clip that came out yesterday. Our old friend Fauci did another interview yesterday where he expressed his serious concerns about what's happening in Florida. He's very concerned about Florida opening up. He said they're asking for trouble. He said the U.S. is not in a good place as fall and winter approach. Now is the time to double down a bit, is what he said. But here's what's interesting about this. He emphasized after he said that, hey, I'm not talking about locking down. I'm not talking about shutting down. So I think that's interesting because I think he actually would love that more than anything. I think he realizes that train has left the station. That is off the table now, and he's not going to get. So I think it's kind of damage control in a way.
But he's still spouting off these false statistics because he said we're in danger. Why we can't do this is that we're still getting 40,000 new cases a day. 40,000 new cases. And then there they are back to twisting the meanings of what a case is versus an infection, and They say that it is so bad they can't possibly consider letting up, and he wants to get these tests that are totally unreliable, have no meaning. He wants them down to 10,000, and maybe we can loosen up a little bit more on the lockdown. But the principle, what right do they have to lock down? And then back to your original part of your statement is they're doing it because they want to improve our health. Well, what if they really, really had absolute proof that what they're doing has really been very helpful? But there's so much evidence now that what they have done has not helped people, has caused more trouble, more suicides and all that. Has it helped the economy at all? It has participated in the destruction of the economy. So it's all an illusion, and yet I mentioned to you a little while ago that I'm amazed. There was where it was in Spain where people sort of just had enough and they threw up their arms and no more of this stuff, no more. I said, isn't it something that old Europe has a spark left? In New America, we don't have a whole lot of spark, but we're seeing more of them, and that's what we want to do. We want to experience and see more people with that spark of liberty left and speak out. Because even though they're small in numbers, we do know when somebody comes forward and say, this is what we need to do, other people we'll feel safer. That's human nature, and we shouldn't say, well, they're evil because they didn't do it. But I think they need a little bit of encouragement, because the fear of getting locked down, when you see these innocent people, like the people that were singing hymns in the church lot.
Yeah, in Idaho,
in Moscow.
Yeah.
And they had, I think it was the minister, he was very calm, cool, and collected. He wasn't going to fight. And they put handcuffs on
Arrested
them
them.
and everything. Also, that doesn't mean that everybody has to take on the policeman who comes in and tries to arrest them, because that would be very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's philosophically, though, we have to get people to not go along just to get along.
Well, Fauci may not have ever treated a single patient, but he is a doctor, and surely he understands when he says we're getting 40,000 cases a day. Surely, as a doctor, he understands that someone testing positive in a test that has a lot of questions asked is not a case. A case is when you're very sick with something. Surely he knows that. So either he is not telling the truth, he's putting forth some propaganda, he wants to scare people. I don't know exactly what it is, but he did say, and it is on tape. I watched, in fact, the tape earlier to remind myself just a couple of months ago. He said asymptomatic people who test positive never, ever drive a pandemic. And so then how is he saying that all of these people who are cases but have no symptoms are driving this pandemic? This is the opposite of what he just said a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I saw an interesting statement. I think it was Dr. Mercola. He said that they are now discovering that vitamin D, which he's a real promoter of vitamin D to protect and encourage your immune system. He says that vitamin D can convert your positive test to a negative.
Wow.
And if that is really the case, can you imagine how ineffective all this testing is done? The number of cases, which aren't really cases, are related to the number of tests they do. And that's big business. Millions and millions of these tests, and they want to keep doing it. They'll say, well, we're thinking about finally letting little kids act like little kids again and go to school. They want to read and write, and we want to do that. But they said we have to have a test, and also implying they will probably, if they're not immune, they're going to get a vaccine.
Yeah.
And it'll be too much too soon as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it was heartbreaking. We were driving down 2004, and there's a school there. We saw some kids out in the schoolyard playing. We looked a little closer, and they all had these masks on as they were running around outside. Really, really sad. But let's go to that last picture that I put up and just have it again, because I want to juxtapose these, if we can. The one with Fauci. If we can put it up there. Fauci says new coronavirus. Yeah, so here's what he said. He's very concerning. We talked about this. But then look at the next clip, Dr. Paul. Florida schools reopened en masse, but a surge in coronavirus didn't follow, a USA Today analysis finds. So this is the truth. Fauci is terrified, but in August, Florida opened its schools for everyone. They opened for in-classroom instruction, and the spike didn't happen. Not only did kids not get sick, which they don't get sick, but they didn't have a spike in cases even. The positive case count in 5 to 17-year-olds actually declined steadily after the July peak, which is the same as we had here in Texas. July peak because we came later than New York, and steady decline. Of course, the USA Today, being mainstream media, said, oh, it's only because the kids had masks and social distancing. But, that's the religion of the COVID people, that you have to have this, otherwise you can't. It's like, and I've heard it said before, it's like if you do a rain dance and it rains the next day and you take credit for it, maybe the case, maybe not the case, but you certainly can't say that there's a causation between the two.
I guess the conflict between Dr. Atlas and the media will continue and accelerate, because, Dr. Atlas said something about Redfield had given this message, and he says everything he says is false. Now that's a bold statement, but I can understand why he would say that. But they're going to get more harsh than ever before, and I hope he's able to continue to do it, because sometimes the pressure gets pretty great. But at least it's so much better than what we've had to put up with WHO organization as well as CDC. At least we're getting a little bit better message right now from the administration.
Yeah, they're clearly at war. Fauci and Redfield from the CDC are at war with Atlas. And as we say, he's not perfect, but he has said some things that are kind of common sense, that people get over these colds when they develop herd immunity. But we talked about a little bit yesterday how Redfield was steaming. He was on the phone with someone while he was in the airport, just steaming. Everything he says is untrue. But here's what Atlas said afterwards. Everything I've said is directly from the data and the science. It echoes what is said by many of the top medical scientists in the world, including those at Stanford, Harvard, and Oxford. And this is what DeSantis did when he opened up Florida. He brought in some extremely well-qualified scientists, doctors, and experts, and he had them present a different view. That's what it's supposed to be about. We have a debate in this country. Science is not some sort of, Moses being handed the Ten Commandments. Science is something that develops. And so what Atlas is doing is citing, renowned scientists who are presenting a different view of how to get over this. And we see from Sweden and South Dakota that approach is kind of working pretty well.
I was interested in the response from the media, when Dr. Atlas spoke up against Redfield. They said the media was stunned to have somebody come up and have a decent answer, and the media really. And the other thing I liked is, I think Alice asked one of the reporters, "Did you ever read the statistic? Did you ever study this?"
Yeah.
In the old days, the reporters were supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But no, they're not going to do that. They're just demagogues.
They're just gotcha question.
Right.
Here's one thing on Florida before we head toward the close is interesting. I was looking up some statistics about young people, about students. Here's a couple of interesting things from the Tampa Bay Times. This is from a couple of months ago, but they reported that 83% of all Florida deaths occurred among those 65 years and older. 83%. And 84% of those under 65 who died had underlying medical issues. And those 24 and under, by July, it's a couple of months old in Florida who died. The number was a big total of 14. 14 people. So for this, everyone is having a panic attack. And, we'll see what happens. But speaking of panic attacks, New York is having a panic attack. Let's look at this next one. I'll just kind of close out here,
Sure.
I think, if we're ready. New York City threatened lockdown Tuesday for COVID-19 hotspots. De Blasio is having a panic attack because what he's done to the city is completely decimated it. He dropped a nuclear weapon on his own town, a neutron bomb, and now he's threatening to lock down because of the COVID hotspots. So you're thinking, wow, New York City, New York must be in desperate straits now. They're going to go back into lockdown. Let's look at the next picture. This is from today. This is what's going on in New York. Look at those deaths. You got to squint a little bit if you want to see them. But for this, they're threatening a lockdown again. And someone suggested, I think there's something to this, he's trying to hide the fact that he's destroyed the city, at least until after the election. And I want to close with one final thing, Dr. Paul, and this might solve some of our mystery of why we got in such trouble the other day when we criticized the WHO. And of course, we're not criticizing them today. Wonderful, wonderful people. But let's look at this last slide. This is the head of the WHO. He's actually calling for countries to take action against anyone who challenges the WHO. And you can see in the quote here what he's saying: we call on the media, technology companies, civil societies, researchers, and people everywhere to keep the infodemic from spreading. So if you say anything that goes against what they have said, and of course they flip-flopped and they've been wrong over and over again, he's actually telling governments, you need to censor these people.
Isn't that exactly what YouTube did?
Yeah.
They got information from him, and then they came down, and they even wrote it in their article.
Yeah.
They said you cannot challenge, the WHO,
Yeah.
World Health Organization.
And he's just saying it. We got to censor people. Okay, well they did it.
Well, they're up front, right?
They're honest.
So, I think a lot about New York City, as a lot of people do. It's rather strange that it could get that far. You have the police system breaking down. You release people who are the most vicious criminals in the world. They go off to killing again. You have the streets in riots, and you have a mayor like de Blasio, and he's so cocky, and the people there still put up with it. The governors put up with it. The people put up with it. And I keep thinking, you know, my sense of optimism gets challenged under these circumstances. How can they put up with this? Where is it? Where are the people? Why aren't they objecting to this? I mean, how can they continue to do this? Are they going to wait until 90% of the stores are closed in New York City? They said half of them have left already, and they're probably the leaders there that have to leave are probably gathering up their bucks and knowing where they're going to retire to. You know, but it is so sad that we don't have more activism. And of course, I think the activism should be there, and I think it should be based on philosophic beliefs and things that we can defend on principle, showing that liberty is better than coercion and tyranny. We're dealing with tyrannical type people who want to run our lives and tell us what to do, believing and convincing people it's in their best interest, which is absolutely false. And no matter how they place it, tyranny is never superior to freedom, because it's impossible to that happens. It's just so destructive. And I thought we had learned a pretty good lesson a couple hundred years ago, and we did pretty well. And those beliefs were lingered for a while. But these past 100 years, once we went into the militarism and having empires around the world and printed press money and income tax, we gave up, and people became, convinced that you can have a free lunch. Well, let me tell you, the bad news is there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And that's what you're discovering, and that's why people are getting nervous. But it's also the reason more and more people are waking up and standing up to it. So we need more people to do that. You can do it peacefully. They look like the real jerks when they have to get people in, and they're 2 or 3 times the size of a young woman, and arrest her because she wouldn't put a mask on, which many of us consider a dangerous thing to do under many conditions. So I think that we just have to do it in numbers. If just people would stand up and say, I'm not going to go along with it. And there have been occasions where there's been groups, people getting together, and they just took their mask off. And if I was thinking for a minute that I would encourage somebody to become sick and die because of what I'm saying, I would be very concerned with myself. I just don't believe that. I think the people that are doing what they're doing with the lockdown and the invasion of our rights and not allowing us to deal with these problems, they're the ones who are causing the great damage, and they're also the ones that have created the bankruptcy in this country. Unfortunately, it's just not. It's not just a monetary bankruptcy and a financial bankruptcy. We have a moral bankruptcy as well, and that's why we have to deal with it. It is not just the finances, but both together. We live in a country right now that we're dealing with a bankruptcy, but we do know what causes it, what happens. We know what people ought to do, and as far as I'm concerned, more and more people are waking up, and I'm very pleased with that. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.